Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. How we doing? Spectre here for another edition of Midnight Rider. Good to have you aboard for this episode. Today on the broadcast, got a couple things we want to cover here. The tribute to Rush Limbaugh. Obviously, yesterday we saw Rush Limbaugh pass, pay some tribute to him for conservative radio, paving the way, obviously. The Texas woes continue with power outages, the lack of heat, hospitals, the moving of patients, and other stuff going on there. And then, of course, today on the broadcast, we're going to talk a little bit about what's going on the Hill out of the House Financial Committee, headed by old Mad Max, and what is going on with the folks over at the GameStop, Robinhood, Citadel, Melvin Capital, all the stuff that took place here a couple weeks back. Got the hearings net going on here today. So we're going to talk about that here momentarily, and I'll see you back here on the other side. Warning. These social media platforms may be hazardous to your health. Censorship kills. Pain coming. This has been a PSA by Breaking Spectre. Alright, welcome back everybody. Like I said, on the broadcast here today, we got a little ground to cover. We're going to talk about Rush Limbaugh's tribute to him after passing yesterday. We found out about midday what happened there. Plenty of tributes and that coming across, as I'm sure services and that are being set up by the family, and I'm sure it'll be roundly attended by many folks and dignitaries and whatnot. I'm going to talk about what's going on still in Texas that I brought to your attention clear back on Sunday now, this now being day 6 of what's going on. And of course, what is going on the Hill today with the stuff going on with the Redditors and whatnot. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go ahead and show you what is going on by way of the Hill at the moment. The hearings that are going on. Here's what it comprises of right at the moment. We've got folks like Vlad Tenev, the Chief Executive Officer of Robinhood Markets there. We got Ken Griffin, Chief Executive Officer of Citadel, who is the order handler for Robinhood. You got Gabriel Plotkin, Chief Executive Officer of Melvin Capital, the one who is kind of stuck in the middle, who got squeezed and pinched with the short selling. You got Steve Huffman, Chief Executive Officer of and co-founder of Reddit. You got Keith Gill, independent investor, and Jennifer Schulp, Director of Financial Regulation Studies at the Cato Institute. What I'm going to do, I'm going to let that play off to the side here as we go forward. I may break here periodically as you go through if anything looks interesting. So I think that's what I'll do here on the afternoon. Alright, that being said, let me get the first article on that brought up here, which is going to be the tribute to old Rush Limbaugh here. There we go. Oops. Alright, so Rush Limbaugh, remembered 12 standout tributes to the conservative talk radio pioneer. And again, yesterday, if you missed the news, Rush passed away late morning, found out, and a lot of folks were broadcasting his passing about midday yesterday. Let's see, out of Christian news journals, they've rounded up 12 outstanding remembrances of the man who shared his fervent political beliefs and messages of independence and freedom, and the lasting importance of the individual with millions of people across this country for over 3 decades. Limbaugh didn't just speak to Americans for more than 30 years on the radio. He educated them, challenged them, inspired them, and connected them. He believed in America and its tremendous prospects as a nation, and dedicated his career to speaking out for it. Here are 12 meaningful remembrances. And the first of which, out of President Donald Trump, said in a statement yesterday, the great Rush Limbaugh has passed away to a better place, free from physical pain and hostility. His honor, courage, strength, and loyalty will never be replaced. Rush was a patriot, a defender of liberty, and someone who believed in all of the greatness our country stands for. Rush was a friend to myself and millions of Americans, a guiding light with the ability to see the truth and paint vivid pictures over the airwaves. Melania and I express our deepest condolences to his wonderful wife, Catherine, his family, and all of his dedicated fans. He will be missed greatly. Trump awarded Limbaugh the Presidential Medal of Freedom in February 2020 and also told Fox News on Wednesday afternoon he loved this country so much. He loved the people of this country so much. Also, out of Ben Dominic, co-founder of The Federalist in a New York Post column, stated Limbaugh understood that what drew people to conservatism has less to do with words in musty old books and more to do with the intrinsic beliefs that reside in the hearts of all patriotic Americans. He understood that because he believed it himself. And how good was Rush? You knew when you sat in your driveway at home, the ignition turned off, but the radio dial still on, stuck between two stations because you wanted to hear the rest of the truth. He was that good. Out of Laura Ingraham, host of the Ingraham Angle, on her Wednesday night show on Fox News, there are no words to adequately capture the man that was Rush Limbaugh, even though we knew that his day was coming. This morning I was in my car, and when I heard that he had passed, I was trying to write something right away, while it was fresh in my mind. I was typing the word was in reference to Rush, and it seemed so wrong. It seemed like an impossibility because millions of us have relied on his wisdom and his perspective for decades, his unbridled talent, his showmanship, his unwavering patriotism, his uproarious sense of humor, his boundless enthusiasm for his craft, his endless love for his listening audience. His defiant perseverance, even in the face of cancer, gave us comfort and, you bet, gave us inspiration. So there we see Laura Ingraham's tweet there. Also, out of Franklin Graham, evangelist and president of Samaritan's Purse, in a tweet says, he was a conservative voice of reason for so many years, and he will be greatly missed. Also, Ted Cruz had this in a tweet, says, rest in peace to the tireless voice for freedom and the conservative movement. Rush Limbaugh, I'm praying for the entire Limbaugh family. Benjamin Netanyahu, Prime Minister of Israel, in a tweet says he was a great friend of Israel and he stood by us through thick and thin. Always firm, never wavering, we shall miss him dearly. Out of Oliver North, co-founder of Freedom Alliance, in a column in Town Hall, stated, says we heard him say it hundreds of times, as did many of you. Talent on loan from God. Some of Rush Limbaugh's detractors like to claim the statement was haughty, but those of us who know him recognize the famous sign-off to his radio program as humility, not ego. Rush was truly an extraordinary talent, a media icon of unprecedented stature. His radio audience of 27 million Americans looked to him not just for guidance and insight, but to give voice to their most deeply held convictions and most deeply felt concerns. Rush said what millions of patriotic Americans thought and felt and had no platform for expressing themselves. And back over to First Lady Melania Trump, and a tweet says Rush was a fearless American patriot. He made countless contributions to society and leaves behind an unforgettable legacy. Out of Kimberly Fletcher, founder and president of Moms for America, said in a statement, an absolute legend and devoted patriot has left us. He gave everything he had to advance the principles and values that made America the freest, most prosperous nation on earth. He taught, informed, and inspired millions. He will be sorely missed. Our founding fathers will be greeting him with honor as he enters the gates of heaven. We pray for his family and for our nation. The greatest honor we can give this man is to continue the legacy and fight the good fight of freedom in our home, communities, and through our vote. God bless you, Rush Limbaugh. We were blessed to have you, and we are better for it. And we also had Larry O'Connor, radio host and commentator in a column in Town Hall, state Rush was to talk radio what the Beatles were to rock and roll. He was to talk radio what Tom Brady was to professional football. He was to talk radio what Michael Jordan was to basketball. The Beatles, Brady, and Jordan were all truly gifted. That's obvious. But they also worked their butts off. They were obsessed with doing what they loved to do with passion and a level of perfectionism that their peers would only marvel at. But what makes Rush's contribution to our culture even more significant is the sheer volume of his output. 3 hours per day, 5 days per week, live, no edits, no do-overs, no second takes, for 30 years. And he was always saying the thing that was on our minds. And from Rep. Steve Scalise, in a tweet, says Rush Limbaugh was an American icon who brought conservatism into the mainstream, and our country is in a better place because of his profound voice. He leaves behind an incredible legacy. Please join me in praying for his family. And from former VP Mike Pence, speaking to America Reports on Fox News, stated, I scarcely believe that I would have had the opportunity to serve in the Congress, serve the people of Indiana as governor, or serve as your vice president without the life, the example, the encouragement, and ultimately the friendship of Rush Limbaugh. Our hearts are heavy today. America lost a giant with the passing of Rush Limbaugh. So, some words in that passed on from various folks around the nation and even outside the country by way of Mr. Netanyahu. But nonetheless, yes, we lost a great one yesterday. Definitely a pioneer in the industry for conservatism. Obviously, if any of you guys have listened to him over the years, he was probably one of the first in that having to deal with censorship. And yet here we are today having to carry that shield forward, as it were. All right, well, that being said, let's get into some of the other news pertaining to Texas. You've heard me talk almost ad nauseum for the last couple of days about this now. Zero Hedge had this as disasters within disaster. Death toll rises to 30 as Texas energy crisis hits 6th day. This updated just a little while ago. Reuters reports House Speaker Nancy Pelosi expects the House Committee on Energy and Commerce to examine Texas's energy issues that resulted in one of the worst controlled blackouts in the country's history. Oh, great. So, aside from the hearing that you see up in the top right of your corner, guess what? We're probably going to have some more hearings. Awesome. And what do we get out of hearings? Nah, not much. In any case, millions of Texans woke up for the 6th day on Thursday as one of the nation's wealthiest states can barely supply electricity to its residents. The power crisis has spread well among its borders, crippling northern Mexico. According to the New York Post, at least 2.7 million Texas households were without heat, electricity, or water on Thursday morning as a polar vortex air mass continues to linger in the Lone Star State. The death toll from the historic cold snap and multiple winter storms has increased to at least 30. Besides power plants, the deep freeze has crippled critical infrastructure systems across the state, such as water treatment plants and cellular networks. This is, in many ways, disasters within the disasters, said Judge Lena Hidalgo, the top elected official in Harris County, which encompasses Houston. The cascading effects are not going to go away. In a note Wednesday, we asked is Texas facing a humanitarian crisis? Come to find out, the answer is yes. The cascading effects of days without power have effectively transformed some parts of Texas into a third world country. And of course, I talked a little bit about that yesterday if you're with us over on the 5x5 channel, highlighting a lot of the water main breakages and the water pipes in people's houses, lines backed up for half a mile to get into various stores. Apparently that continues. The local economy is in tatters as 1/5 of the nation's refining capacity has come to a screeching halt. Readers in other states should prepare for a surge in crude product prices, such as gasoline and diesel. Also, the state's oil and natural gas production has ground to a halt. Governor Greg Abbott announced Wednesday that he has forbidden gas producers from selling to power producers outside its borders through February 21st. And I don't know that I mentioned this yesterday, but if you just so happen to be one of those type of folks who owns an electric car that needs to get charged up, like a Tesla Model S or X or anything of those natures, you can expect to pay through the nose to charge your car now. The running price yesterday was in the neighborhood of about $900 to charge your vehicle. So, and I digress here momentarily, one must ask a very simple question, and perhaps one per our leadership, if you want to call them that, maybe have not thought about, right? When we go through this Green New Deal stuff, Agenda 21, Agenda 2030, with the mad rush to all the electric cars, where is all that electricity going to come from? And what happens if, by chance, we get a polar vortex where all of a sudden you can't produce enough electricity to even charge your car? Can't get down to the local gas station for firewood. Can't get down to the local grocery store for bread and water. I guess you just don't drive? I guess they must not have really thought that one through, did they? Nonetheless, the disruption has also spilled over into Mexico, where the U.S. has curbed natural gas exports, resulting in power stations grinding to a halt. Oilprice.com expands more on the chaos unfolding across Mexico's northern power grid. The plummeting natural gas exports from the United States to Mexico amid an Arctic cold spell in the country that has led to a gas demand surge is causing blackouts in northern Mexico, with some 4.77 million households and businesses left without power on Monday. Argus noted that most of the natural gas Mexico receives from the United States comes from the Permian, where the production of both oil and gas has been affected by the cold weather that has caused power outages across Texas. Oil wells are being shut down, and so are refineries along the Gulf Coast. Reuters reported earlier today, adding oil and gas pipeline operations were also disrupted by the weather. The blackouts, Bloomberg reports, will strengthen the government's argument that Mexico needs to be less dependent on energy imports, with President Andres Manuel Lopez Obrador spearheading the drive to reduce this dependency. Obrador wants to boost Mexico's domestic oil and gas production to tackle the problem, but this has proved challenging without the participation of private energy companies, as the president seeks to fortify the dominant status of state energy major Pemex. Refinitiv Icon data shows net gas flow from the U.S. to Mexico plunged 75% over the last week after Abbott directed a ban on gas producers exporting outside its borders. Power cuts have affected millions and led to automobile manufacturers shuttering operations this week because of the lack of natural gas needed to power plants. There's also talk of an ag disaster in Texas as its citrus crop could amount to significant losses. The impact of the cold weather and storms won't be realized for another few weeks. Growers are already warning that crop losses could be substantial. Since Texas is the nation's third largest citrus producer state behind California and Florida, a loss in crop could result in skyrocketing prices. And it comes at a time when many Americans are already dealing with soaring food inflation. At the same time, others can barely afford to pay rent and feed their families. Abbott released a statement earlier this week following the power grid collapse, calling for lawmakers to investigate the state's power grid operator, ERCOT. The worst is likely over, as warmer temperatures could be seen by the weekend. But for weeks after, Texas will be dealing with a multitude of problems related to a power grid collapse that is still ongoing. So, the biggest takeaway from the largest controlled blackout in American history is that trust in private corporations and government to manage your well-being is set to collapse even further. Parts of Texas are effectively a third world country this week. Maybe being a prepper and storing a few cans of beans, a couple coins of silver, a few bitcoins, some ammunition, a generator, and clean water might not be a bad idea. Gee, you think? Think it's good to be prepared, especially in the winter, having items like that, preparing. Yeah, and I'm sure the Mockingbird media will be all about telling you guys all about doing just that, won't they? Well, continuing on out of Texas Tribune, Texas power outages, water problems mount, food runs scarce, and hospitals are scrambling. We're tracking the fallout from the massive winter storm in Texas, which has brought widespread power outages and transportation problems. So out of the article, ERCOT says progress being made on restoring power. Greg Abbott provides few details on when Texans' suffering will end. Texas leaders failed to heed warnings that left the state's power grid vulnerable, experts say, and the Austin area hospitals face widespread water issues. So starting off with ERCOT, it says progress is being made on restoring power. progress being made to restore power to the majority of millions of Texans whose electricity and heat was forced off by energy providers during the sub-freezing temperatures this week, Texas energy grid operators said Thursday morning. We're to the point in the load restoration where we are allowing transmission owners to bring back any load they can related to this load shed event, said Dan Woodfin with the Electric Reliability Council of Texas in a statement. Those without power still, he said, are more likely to be affected by ice storm damage on power distribution systems that need to be manually restarted after they were forced to shut down, and large power facilities that voluntarily went offline and haven't again started dispersing energy. Austin Energy reported Thursday morning that 13% of its energy customers were without power, compared to more than 40% Monday. Less than 2% of the Houston area was reportedly without power, which had seen about 60% of its homes and businesses without power during the storm, according to Jolie McCullough. Abbott provides few details on when Texan suffering will end as the state's crises mount. So as millions of Texans continue struggling through a days-long winter storm without power or potable water, Governor Greg Abbott provided few details Wednesday on when they can expect their situations to improve. As of Wednesday, 2.7 million households didn't have power, and nearly 12 million Texans are facing water disruptions after enduring multiple days of freezing temps. Texans running low on food are finding empty grocery store shelves, food pantries are running out of supplies, and the freeze has wiped out substantial portions of the state's citrus and vegetable crops. Continuing on, Texans leaders failed to heed warnings that left the state's power grid vulnerable, experts say. Texas officials knew winter storms could leave the state's power grid vulnerable, but they left the choice to prepare for harsh weather up to the power companies, many of which opted against the costly upgrades. That, plus a deregulated energy market largely isolated from the rest of the country's power grid, left the state alone to deal with the crisis, experts said. And I'm going to have more to say about that here in some subsequent articles here momentarily. And so here we see the ERCOT implemented blackouts on Monday as power plants went offline. There you see the little hiccup, as it were, the knee in the curve on February 15th, 1:25 a.m. Monday, where they started to shed power and brought the energy used down versus capacity in the blue line there through about noon today, it appears. While Texas Republicans were quick to pounce on renewable energy and to blame frozen wind turbines, the natural gas, nuclear, and coal plants that provide most of the state's energy also struggled to operate during the storm. Green energy has been a political punching bag for Texas Republicans like Governor Greg Abbott throughout the winter storm. Experts say politicians never take responsibility for natural disasters when it comes to preparedness. Hospitals in Austin are running out of water, forcing some to transfer patients. So Austin area hospitals are facing widespread water issues after severe weather this week. St. David's South Austin Medical Center said it lost water pressure from the city Wednesday, creating a series of problems. Seton hospitals in the area are also facing water problems. A spokesperson for Ascension Seton said in a statement that extreme weather conditions have caused intermittent water issues at several Ascension Seton facilities. In a letter obtained by KUT, patients and families at Dell Children's are being asked to not take showers and to use hand sanitizer to clean their hands. They were also told the toilets can't flush and staff members are changing linens only as needed. That according to Ashley Lopez out of KUT. All right, well, that being said, what about this whole deal with energy? Well, what it boils down to, and I guess I'll first jump over to the Zero Hedge article here talking about the winterization of nuclear plants. Texas failed to winterize nuclear plant, leading to reactor shutdown. So as a polar vortex split dumped Arctic air into Texas along with multiple winter storms, created havoc on the state's power grid operated by the Electric Reliability Council of Texas. What happened and why? More specifically, how did one nuclear power plant which provides power for 2 million homes shut down? How is it possible that a nuclear power plant in Texas had to shutter operations due to freezing weather, but nuclear power plants can operate without disruption in Russia? The answer is simple. The South Texas Nuclear Power Station failed to winterize its facilities. After all, Whoever thought Arctic conditions would be seen in the Gulf of Mexico? So on Monday, the nuclear power plant had to shut one of two reactors down, having its 2,700 megawatts of generating capacity. The plant, which operates a 12,200-acre site west of the Colorado River, about 90 miles southwest of Houston, provides power for more than 2 million homes. According to Washington Examiner, the nuclear power plant was not winterized to withstand cold weather. It's very rare for weather issues to shut down a nuclear plant, said Brett Rampel, Director of Nuclear Innovation at the Clean Air Task Force. Some equipment in some nuclear plants in Texas has not been hardened for extreme cold weather because there was never a need for this. Now, wait a minute. Didn't I just talk yesterday about 10 years ago Texas went through a similar deal? I could be wrong. So, in 10 years' time, you mean to tell me there was not enough money to harden your equipment against winter conditions? I find that very hard to believe. On Monday, South Texas Nuclear Power Station posted event number 55104 on the Nuclear Regulatory Commission website explaining low steam generation was due to the loss of water pumps. In response, Reactor 1 was shut down. And here you see that particular event incident. EN revision text, automatic reactor trip due to low steam generator level, loss of feedwater pumps 11 and 13, cause unknown. It was the connection between the power plant and outside systems. Alex Gilbert, project manager at the Nuclear Innovation Alliance, told the Washington Examiner the reactor's shutdown only represented 1,280 megawatts of the 30,000 megawatts of outages on Monday. Nuclear power provides about 11% of ERCOT's power. Much of the power generation loss was due to freezing wellheads that impeded the flow of natural gas to power stations, triggering electric shortages as demand overwhelmed the grid. The high concentration of natural gas generation on ERCOT's grid makes it vulnerable to power disruptions if fuel flow is disrupted. And this graph here depicts from about February 10th through the 16th, kind of the disbursement of the various fuel types. Nuclear being here down toward the bottom. The lower, I would say, maybe 4,000 megawatts or so in red. You get the brown here with the coal, and of course in the middle here is all natural gas. On top of that, you get this little riding green stripe of wind, and then of course solar here, this little bitty yellow blip occasionally, pretty much negligible. What's worse is that ERCOT is a separate grid from the rest of the country. This means ERCOT had limited ability to pull power from other grids, which was why the blackouts occurred. And of course, we know that Texas basically has its own individualized grid. It says reactors' return would boost the grid and help in restoring power. Overnight, ERCOT tweeted that they continue to restore power. Electric companies continue to bring generation back online. Arctic air is expected to leave the Lone Star State by the late week. This means power generation could be mostly restored as various fuel types of generation come back online. But even as power returns, Texas is facing a humanitarian crisis, as unintended consequences of a several-day power grid collapse have left many people hungry, emotionally distraught, local economies ground to a halt, skyrocketing power bills for some, broken pipes in residential and commercial structures, water main breaks, and a major embarrassment for state leadership. Maybe, just maybe, Texas should start winterizing their power grid for a start. Significant reforms to ERCOT will come, and it wouldn't shock us if a movement begins to push the power operator to tie its grid into the rest of the nation's. Well, and to make matters worse, what this also doesn't highlight, and I brought up yesterday, for those paying attention to commodities on the stock market, copper prices and that are definitely going through the roof at the moment. So every one of the folks Nat who have had burst pipes Nat with copper pipes, guess what? You're probably going to pay through the nose for copper replacements. And as if that isn't bad enough, if you have any level of structural damage that requires wood at all, well, guess what? Due to COVID, you know that lumber prices now were already about 6x what it should be. Lumber futures last night just went to probably their highest ever. So even that is not going to be good if in the event they have to do any sort of rebuilding and replacement as a result. All right, continuing on that theme, we get into this out of PJ Media. Did frozen wind turbines impact the Texas freeze? Here's the data. And of course, you just saw the graph net that I presented over about a 6-day window of how much wind actually contributes. So Wednesday morning, more than 1.3 million electric power customers across Texas remain without power during the coldest winter storm in decades. Governor Greg Abbott put all of the Texas 254 counties under a disaster declaration as the state has been hammered with a series of major and historic winter storms. The reasons for the collapse of the Electric Reliability Council of Texas grid are still being debated, and it's certain there is more than one cause and more information will come out. But one of the most contested issues is the role wind generation has played. Prior to the onset of the storm last week, Texas led the nation in wind power generation and depended on the wind turbines in west central and western Texas, along with a smaller number of turbines along the Gulf Coast, for about 25% of its electricity. As wind power has increased, coal power generation plants have been taken offline around the state. Texas has abundant coal, oil, and natural gas, and also has nuclear plants near Dallas and near Houston. Real-time data from the U.S. Energy Information Administration shows that wind power collapsed as the winter storm swept across the state. And I'm not sure if that really shows up real well on screen, as it doesn't in the article either. But the EIA data shows the collapse of the wind power generation in Texas during the winter storm, as evidenced here, I suppose, by the knee in the curve. To understand the graph, the very top line, beige, is natural gas power generation. Hydroelectric is the barely perceptible blue line at the bottom. Wind is the green line, coal is brown, nuclear power is purple. The graph clearly shows all forms of power generation dipped, with wind power collapsing from Monday to Tuesday before recovering somewhat. Meanwhile, natural gas, coal, and nuclear power generation also dipped, but continued generating power. Gas pipelines and a cooling system at the STP nuclear plant outside Houston did suffer the effects of the extreme cold. And here's another representation of the graphic I just showed, actually dating back to the 4th now. So the piece we saw before, I think, chops it off at the 10th, so that's about a 2-week window. Electric Reliability Council of Texas shows this, again dating from the 4th of February now through the 16th. The green is the representation of wind, which essentially got, looks like it cut about in half, I would say, maybe around the 10th, somewhere in there. As the graph plainly shows, wind generation choked down, but natural gas compensated. Coal and even nuclear power generation dipped. Solar generation has been negligible due to cloud cover and several inches of snow and ice. The cold has created extreme demand across the state. During most winter storms, the Panhandle, West Texas, and even North Texas around Dallas and above toward Paris may get cold, but Central and South Texas could remain well above freezing. This has not happened during the current series of storms. The entire state is in a deep freeze, with snow appearing even on Galveston Island's beach. Galveston averaged lows of about 50 degrees and highs in the mid-60s during a typical February, and it's 37 degrees in Galveston as I write this, well below average. Austin has seen single-digit temps at night. To put all this into some perspective, the storm that dumped more than 6 inches of ice and snow on Austin Sunday night would, by itself, have been a historic storm. It dropped more snow on the capital than any other storm since 1949. It was preceded by a major cold snap and has been followed by more extreme cold than any other ice and snowstorm Tuesday night. Texas has not suffered a single historic winter storm over the past several days, but a series of them without any warming in between. It's unlikely to get above freezing in the Austin area until Friday. Points north may stay below freezing for a couple of days after that. This is putting more demand on the grid. And add to all of this, when Texas gets winter storms, it usually doesn't just get snow. Snow is fairly easy to deal with. Texas also gets ice, which can snap electric lines and break trees and tree branches, which also can fall on and break power lines. A tree in my yard is bent over by ice to the point that it looks like an invisible hand is holding it down. We can expect the ice to kill off millions of trees around the state. The ice layers also render most roads impassable. All of this is very unusual for Texas, but not unprecedented. The winter of 1836 was notably harsh. Santa Anna reportedly encountered deep snow as he marched his army towards San Antonio. Most winters, Austin will have a few cold days, but no snow. Central Texas is known to go entire winters without anyone having to so much as scrape any frost off their car windshield. Austin has had 2 significant snowstorms in 2021, with the current one being historic by any measure. Piecing known information together, the wind turbines in western Texas froze up starting Friday before the icy snowstorm hit on Sunday night to Monday morning. This destabilized the Texas grid ahead of the worst of the storm. The storm produced the temperatures and precipitation the forecasts expected, but with weakened power generation and demand skyrocketing to heat millions of homes which for the most part are not insulated against the current level of cold temperatures, the grid was set up to suffer mightily as it's not hardened against extreme cold, such as this one in a century storm series is delivering. So an addendum to this says, I should add that we know production in the Permian decreased very significantly too, with demand surging and all significant power sources dipping, and wind and solar dipping more than any of the other sources. So Texas experienced a confluence of unusual events that pushed the grid statewide far beyond normal tolerances. Opportunists such as AOC and Beto O'Rourke are deliberately politicizing the storm. Neither actually understands energy. Both understand rank dishonesty. So there you have one of the pieces, Nat, out of PJ Media. We're going to come back to another one here momentarily. But the Federalist had this to say as well in regards to green energy. Texas blackouts are the result of unreliable green energy. Well, is it based on the graphs, Nat, that we've seen thus far? Let's find out. The blackouts, which have left as many as 4 million Texans trapped in the cold, show the numerous chilling consequences of putting too many eggs in the renewable basket. As Texans reel from ongoing blackouts at the worst possible time, during a nationwide cold snap that has sent temps plummeting to single digits, the news has left people in other states wondering, how could this happen in Texas, the nation's energy powerhouse? But policy experts have seen this moment coming for years. The only surprise is that the house of cards collapsed in the dead of winter, not the toasty Texas summers that usually shatter peak electricity demand records. The blackouts, which have left as many as 4 million Texans trapped in the cold, show the numerous chilling consequences of putting too many eggs in the renewable basket. Fossil fuels aren't to blame. Says there are misleading reports asserting the blackouts were caused by large numbers of natural gas and coal plants failing or freezing. Here's what really happened. The vast majority of our fossil fuel power plants continued running smoothly, just as they do in far colder climates across the world. Power plant infrastructure is designed for cold weather and rarely freezes, unlike wind turbines that must be specially outfitted to handle extreme cold. It appears that ERCOT, Texas grid operator, was caught off guard by how soon demand began to exceed supply. Failure to institute a managed rolling blackout before the grid frequency fell to dangerously low levels meant some plants had to shut off to protect their equipment. This is likely why so many power plants went offline, not because they had failed to maintain operations in the cold weather. Yet these operational errors overshadow the decades of policy blunders that made these blackouts inevitable. Thanks to market-distorting policies that favor and subsidize wind and solar energy, Texas has made more than 20,000 megawatts of those intermittent resources since 2015, which barely added any natural gas and retiring significant coal generation. And I guess I'll pause there and think of an article that I just recently came across here back in 2017. Perhaps you guys down in Texas may recall this, but I believe it was a guy by the name of Mr. Bezos that invested pretty heavily in a wind farm and that down in Texas. I don't remember how many megawatts and that actually brought online, but most of those being about 300-foot tall turbines and that dating back to 2017. So again, I wonder if Mr. Bezos was perhaps subsidized as this article describes. increased reliance on unreliable renewables. On the whole, Texas is losing reliable generation and counting solely on wind and solar to keep up with its growing electricity demand. I wrote last summer about how ERCOT was failing to account for the increasing likelihood that an event combining record demand with low wind and solar generation would lead to blackouts. The only surprise was that such a situation occurred during a rare winter freeze, and not during the predictable Texas summer heat waves. Yet, ERCOT still should not have been surprised by this event, as its own long-term forecast indicated it was possible, even in the winter. Although many wind turbines did freeze and total wind generation was at 2% of installed capacity Monday night, overall wind production at the time the blackouts began was roughly in line with ERCOT forecasts from the previous week. We knew solar would not produce anything during the night, when demand was peaking. Intermittency is not a technical problem, but a fundamental reality when trying to generate electricity from wind and solar. This is a known and predictable problem, but Texas regulators fooled themselves into thinking that the risk of such low wind and solar production at the time it was needed most was not significant. Special breaks helped cause the blackouts. The primary policy blunder that made this crisis possible is the lavish suite of government incentives for wind and solar. They guarantee profits too big, often foreign corporations, and lead to market distortions that prevent reliable generators from building the capacity we need to keep the lights on when wind and solar don't show up. Research by the Texas Public Policy Foundation's Life-powered project found that more than $80 billion of our tax dollars have been spent on wind and solar subsidies in the last decade, and federal subsidies alone. Texans are also charged on average of $1.5 billion a year in state subsidies for renewable energy. All that cash hasn't materially changed our energy landscape. Wind and solar still provide just 4% of our energy nationwide. The promise that subsidies would kickstart renewable energy technology remains unmet after more than 40 years. Renewable advocates will be quick to point out that fossil fuels also receive subsidies from the federal government. That's partially true, but solar companies receive 75 times more money and wind 17 times more per unit of electricity generated. Nevertheless, the best solution for Texans and all Americans would be to eliminate all energy subsidies and allow the free market to drive our energy choices. As politically popular as wind and solar energy are, no amount of greenwashing can cover up their fundamental unreliability and impracticality for anything other than a supplemental energy source. Yet, our government, even in the oil country of Texas, home of Spindletop and the Permian Basin, is designed to incentivize renewable energy projects. And to keep this from happening again, well, this week's blackouts should be a wake-up call to politicians. Overconfidence in renewables led us uncomfortably close to total grid failure. And when the going gets tough, few things really matter to voters as much as access to electricity. Without it, scrambling for the barest necessities like food, water, and warmth becomes expensive, stressful, and all-consuming. The consequences are potentially deadly. For all the talk of climate change, cold is far deadlier than heat, responsible for 20 times more deaths. Although the cold itself may not kill you, you might not literally freeze to death. It has devastating potential to exacerbate pre-existing conditions and make otherwise minor illnesses life-threatening. It's a reality far too many know firsthand, as a recent study found. Increasing natural gas utility prices led to an increase in wintertime deaths as they forced families to choose between putting food on the table and paying the heat bill. In this health-conscious era of the COVID-19 crisis, this should be enough to pause any policy discussion that might inhibit electricity access. So here's what to do. The Texas legislature, and other states hoping to avoid similar messes, should act decisively to protect our electrical grid in a few specific ways. First, they should require all electric generation to be dispatchable or readily available, meaning generators guarantee a certain amount of power will be available at all times. No more should we tolerate wind turbines pumping out a measly 2% of their capacity and leaving Texas families in the cold. Second, they should end subsidies for both renewable and traditional energy sources. Research by the Texas Public Policy Foundation explains extensively the problem with energy subsidies, including distorting markets without improving technology or shifting our energy landscape in the slightest. Rather than wasting tax dollars trying and failing to pick winners and losers, lawmakers should allow the free market to work. Finally, they should work to discourage the discriminatory practice of environmental, social, and governance (ESG) investing, which prioritizes political correctness over fiduciary duty and places workers' and retirees' futures at risk. Texas and several other states will file legislation soon to prohibit companies that boycott or divest from fossil fuels from doing business with the government. It's a good start to ensure this energy discrimination campaign doesn't infiltrate state pensions and investments. Especially in the bitter cold of winter, a life without electricity is a miserable one. It's unfortunate that years of poor policy choices, coupled with ERCOT's mismanagement, made this crisis reality for so many Texans. Texans learned firsthand the consequences of unreliable renewable energy this week. If their voices are heard, it won't happen again. And I guess if there's one point perhaps that this article may have missed, it is this. Think of the migration that is taking place out of blue states right now, whether it be California, New York, and some of these states that had these harsh lockdown policies. Think of the stress of additional people being put into said grid, right? How have they planned for addition of more people migrating to their respective states? How many companies at this point have left Silicon Valley and California and New York for warmer states, whether it be Florida or Texas in this case? How much additional stress is that going to put on things? And again, as I've already mentioned, this Green New Deal BS. Everybody going to electrification of cars. GM deciding in 2035, hey, we're going to get rid of the internal combustion engine. Where in the Sam hell is all the electricity going to come from to charge your car as well as heat homes and put electricity in people's houses on top of what is already taking place here today? You think that's going to happen? I sure as hell don't. You might need to rethink the whole plan here, folks. Nonetheless, back over to PJ Media. It says Texas Electric Reliability Council removes board members from website as their residencies are questioned. Oh, so here we go. We start to dig into who exactly ERCOT is, and mysteriously people start disappearing off of websites. Where have we seen this before? Many, probably most Texans hadn't heard of the Electric Reliability Council of Texas until this week. Then, a historic winter storm froze up the place, and electric reliability turned into an unfunny joke for far too many. Their electricity was reliably unavailable. Well, except in certain well-lit urban downtowns. If you live outside of those, as most Texans do, you are forced to play a grim version of Russian roulette with your power and water supply. If you could get either. Your water pipes, they may have frozen and burst, rendering your frigid home uninhabitable. I have friends who are dealing with this and will be dealing with it for a long time after the storm. Power went out for millions of Texans several days ago and is only now being restored piecemeal. Freezing temperatures won't even leave central Texas until Friday. Much of the state north of that may stay cold for days yet. Texans are getting to know the 50-year-old council and are not liking what they're learning. For one thing, about a third of its members don't even live in Texas. A third of the board of directors that operate the state's electrical grid do not appear to live in Texas, and their performance in wake of widespread outages has led to a Dallas area lawmaker's call for change. Records show that the two top office holders of the 15-member board of the Electric Reliability Council of Texas live out of state. 3 other ERCOT board members also appear to live thousands of miles from Texas. The thought of some Californian voting on our energy market doesn't sit well. For another, it turns out that the board members nominate each other to it. How that hasn't come up as a glaring conflict of interest before now is a head-scratcher. Pals nominating pals who nominate other pals to this board in Texas? And you don't even have to live there? Well, now that the glare has turned on ERCOT, it has removed the board members' names from its website. They're gone. They were all there earlier in the week. ERCOT has had a difficult job dealing with the terrible storm, but its public communications have not helped. As the storm started in earnest Sunday, its social media released this. Unplug the fancy new appliances you bought during the pandemic and only used once. Hashtag conserve, hashtag stop phantom energy. Good advice, huh? Well, now its board has disappeared itself precisely when Governor Abbott and everyone else in the state is demanding transparency. We're beyond this is not a good look territory. Well beyond. The legislature is angry. Hearings will commence next week. Among the conversations to be had are how much the state should depend on wind power, which did collapse as demand surged, but has bounced back. And if we're going to depend on wind, then why don't we winterize the windmills in West Texas? It gets cold out there. Not usually this cold, but cold enough to consider winterizing. That will cost money, but should be discussed. Another will be, is it possible to keep a few coal plants in working order, just in case another winter like this strikes? There will be loads of economic questions attached to that one. Coal plants were the casualties of the billion-dollar subsidies that developed wind and solar power in Texas. But coal is more reliable than just about anything else when you need it most. It's also cheap, and it's available in parts of Texas. Another will be, should Texas fully embrace nuclear? Both it and coal have provided a steady power baseline throughout the storms, though one reactor did have to get taken offline when its water cooling system froze up. That was the one outside Houston, by the way, which is normally in the 60s to 70s this time of year. That part of the state gets hurricanes, but it doesn't usually get ice and snowstorms. So a quick and incomplete mental sketch of how all this happened might go something like this. Investigations will find out a whole lot more. The wind turbines out west froze Friday. Demand statewide surged as every county got blasted, starting Friday to Saturday. As demand surged, wind, which usually provides between 25 to 42% of Texas power, but can drop to roughly 10% in the wintertime, dropped all the way to about 2% of its normal output Monday night and Tuesday morning. Natural gas compensated, but then its pipelines froze, and even the oil wells froze up. Production in the Permian went off a cliff, causing havoc in the market energy prices. Ice was also snapping power lines in untold numbers of places. Crews have been hampered, even getting to them due to the widespread ice. The state had no respite, no region where demand for power was not surging, so it could balance the grid, which it usually does have. For instance, in most circumstances, it could get very cold in the Panhandle, but still be 70 from Waco south. That's a huge area, larger than many whole states, over which most people won't be using a lot of power. So power could be surged to the cold area, which is also larger than many whole states, and which is not as heavily populated. But this week, the entire state, which is the size of Germany, froze, and millions have already been hitting power harder than usual by working from home thanks to the pandemic. Then 29 million of us, thanks to population growth that none of our infrastructure has been able to keep up with. Thanks, California. Aha, and there's the mention of it that I just brought up. Needed a lot of heat just to make our homes livable and keep pipes from bursting and destroying everything. Did I mention that most Texas homes are engineered for extreme summer heat, not Arctic winters? And that we have millions who have never dealt with cold and ice like this before? Either because they're new to the state or because this is an historic storm? I'm not a fan of using the phrase perfect storm, but this one was one and still is. ERCOT will change. Count on that. Rep. Jeff Leach out of Plano told WFAA that he was totally shocked to learn a third of the ERCOT board of directors lived outside Texas. People who are making literally life and death decisions on behalf of our families and our communities don't even live in the state of Texas, Leach said. I'm frustrated and cannot believe that the board chair of our leading energy decision maker doesn't even live in Texas, but lives in Michigan. It just cannot be that way here, in the Lone Star State. Leach said he has begun drafting legislation to prohibit non-Texans from serving on the ERCOT board. Now, board members are appointed by a nominating committee made up of current members. That screams conflict of interest and sweetheart deals. ERCOT will have to change. A lot. Its methods will change. Its board will change. Its transparency and communications will change. Anything less will not leave us ready for the next storm and for communicating what's happening to Texans affected by it. Several agencies may have to consider some new measures and mandates. Between the pandemic, the economy, a brewing border crisis, and now the massive winter disaster, the governor and the legislators have their work cut out for them. They'll have to be proactive and smart. Millions of Texans are still freezing and are justifiably angry about it. So there you have it. I think that article pretty well nails it on the head. And the fact that ERCOT is so sinister to start hiding the various folks on their board off of their website should say it all. Frankly, they all need to be fired at that point, right? And last but not least, as if to add further insult to injury, you get the dipshitiots on the left making light of this. Bette Midler makes vile remark about Texas winter storm, claims it's payback from God to Senator Cruz. Texans are suffering through a harsh winter storm that has caused widespread power outages and has killed at least 21 people. Bette Midler said the storm is payback from God against Senators Cruz and John Cornyn. Bette Midler described Republican senators from Texas as hateful, vicious, and cruel. Midler suggested God is punishing them for voicing objections to the Electoral College certification in January. I feel for the people suffering through this weather, but hashtag God doesn't seem to like hashtag Ted Cruz or hashtag John Cornyn. These two also never recognize that hashtag Joe won, she wrote. If this isn't payback, I don't know what is. And there you see her tweet there. Inept is a wrong word. Hateful, vicious, cruel might all apply. I feel for the people. Dan Hollow says, LOL, wait, Republican Texas is asking for disaster relief after a snowstorm, but both her senators voted against giving relief for Hurricane Sandy. Cornyn and Cruz might be the most inept senators in the country at this point. Midler blamed this winter storm on climate change, stating that Al Gore warned of such possibilities 3 decades ago. Sure you did, Bet. The winter storm is believed to have knocked out power to 4 million Texans. Heavy snowfall and winds stopped green energy sources in its tracks, including windmills that were rendered useless due to ice. So there you have it. The yin-yangs on the left with their typical Trump derangement syndrome have to pipe up and voice their opinions for what it's worth. All right, well, that being said, that is what we got going on by way of Texas, at least here today. So I think at this point, what I'll probably do, before jumping over to the hearing and letting that rip, I guess maybe a little bit of a break from that. Maybe you guys remember the last time we got to see Mad Max on the Hill. Here, maybe this will just lighten it up a little bit.
If you'd wish to keep me here so that I don't have my important meeting and continue to grill me, then we can do that. I will cancel my meeting and I will not be back here. I will be very clear if that's the way you'd like to have this relationship.
Thank you. The gentleman, the secretary, has agreed to stay to hear all of the rest of the members.
Okay,
Please
so just
cancel
let's be
your
clear to
meeting
the press.
and respect our time.
I am
Who is next on the
canceling
list?
my foreign meeting. You're instructing me to stay here and I should cancel.
No, you just made me an offer.
No, I didn't make you an offer.
You made me an offer that I accepted.
I did not make you an offer. Just let's be clear. You're instructing me. You are ordering me to stay here.
No, I'm not ordering you. I'm responding. I said you may leave anytime you want. And you said, okay, if that's what you want to do, I'll cancel my appointment and I'll stay here. So I'm responding to your request. If that's what you want to do.
That's not what I want to do. I told you.
What would you like to do?
What I've told you is I thought it was respectful that you'd let me leave at 5:15.
You are free to leave anytime you want. You may go anytime you want.
Please dismiss everybody. I believe you're supposed to take the gravel and bang it. That's
Please do not instruct me as to how I'm to conduct this committee.
Oh, that is a favorite. I think you're supposed to take the gravel and bang it to dismiss us. Well, I don't know if we're going to see the shenanigans like that play out here today, but nonetheless, let's take a gander at what's going on over there here at the moment. Let me back this up real quick. All right, so let's see. There we go. We'll listen in on this here briefly. Oh, they're in recess. Outstanding. All right, so I guess maybe we won't do that after all. So, real quick, I guess we'll go through and take a look at what brought all this on, just as kind of a recap. If you've paid attention over the last couple weeks, what's been going on with the whole GameStop stocks, stonks, as they like to call them, the Redditors, the Wall Street bets folks, and everybody that's been involved with the short selling and everything else. Let's get into that. All right, so let's see here. I'll bring that back up. There we go. All right. Oop, I guess I forgot one last piece. Hey, just to round things out, and before I do get into that, there is one more storm expected to spread across the Northeast. We got the widespread power losses. At least 1 million Texans are without power as blackouts and grid failures continue. Old Man Winter's brutal assault against the nation this week will spread more wintry chaos to the Mid-Atlantic and Northeast states on Thursday through Friday. The National Weather Service said more than 100 million Americans are in the path of a storm as it traversed the southern plains earlier this week and is finally arriving on the East Coast Thursday morning. The National Weather Service has posted winter storm warnings and winter weather advisories from the Deep South to New York City. And here you can see the path of destruction, and that, as it were. Snowfall from the storm stretches from the northeast into the Ohio Valley and southern Great Lakes this morning. Wintry mix could be seen in West Virginia, and parts of the Delmarva Peninsula. And there we saw the radar as of early this morning. Continuing on, here's the forecast. What is expected to occur throughout the day today: D.C., Baltimore, Philly, New York, Boston, etc. The forecast precipitation model shows the storm will be out of the northeast by late Friday. You can see the maps and that show the system and that pushing out to the Atlantic. Accumulating snow is expected across the Mid-Atlantic and Northeast Interstate 95 corridor, and this could make travel conditions dangerous. And here we see the additional snow forecast through about Friday. The purple indicating probably somewhere in the neighborhood of 5 to 8 inches-ish, somewhere in there. So perhaps the folks in D.C. may get snowed in. We'll have to see. All right, so as I mentioned, with the GameStop stuff playing out here, what is actually going on with that? Well, we get this. Prepared remarks for the GameStop hearings. As I mentioned at the top of the broadcast, we got Vlad Tanov of Robinhood, we got Kenneth Griffin from Citadel, we got Gabriel Plotkin from Melvin Capital, we got Steve Huffman from Reddit, we got Keith Gill, an independent investor, and Jennifer Schulp from the Director of Financial Regulation Studies at the Cato Institute, all testifying here. All prior to broadcast were in the process of giving their prepared statements. Some of those I'm going to go ahead and go through here, some snippets out of that. But again, what got us here is the fact that the little guy, the little investors that could, decided they wanted to rear their ugly heads and buy up GameStop. And of course, many of them were piled into places like Robinhood. And of course, Robinhood couldn't meet demand as that was bid up on basically the equivalent of a penny stock at the time. And of course, the Melvin Capitals and the folks over at Citadel were the ones bankrolling Robinhood behind the scenes. And of course, as the whole melee played out over the course of that week, we found out a lot more details of the underpinnings of the machinations of Wall Street and the hedge funders and the like. The fact that Robinhood didn't have enough capital on hand as required by the DTC and things of that nature. So here we go, and of course this has now spun up a whole bunch of hearings, which has started here today. This is on Thursday. The House Financial Services Committee will convene its planned hearing on the GameStop trading fiasco, where the heads of Citadel, Robinhood, Reddit, and Melvin Capital will come together to face off against Democrats like Committee Chair Mad Max, and AOC. Ahead of that, some of the planned testimonials have been released. Below, find remarks from Keith Gill, a YouTuber Redditor best known as Roaring Kitty, and his testimony. The trader, who is facing a lawsuit related to his trading and online antics, insists that he still believes in his fundamental case for being long GameStop and insists that he didn't try and pump the shares purely for his own profit. In his own testimony, Gill recounts how his family had an incredibly difficult 2020 after losing his sister to COVID. I did not solicit anyone to buy or sell the stock for my own profit. I did not belong to any groups trying to create movements in the stock price. I never had a financial relationship with any hedge fund. I had no information about GameStop except what was public. I did not know any people inside the company, and I never spoke to any insider. As an individual investor, I use publicly available information to study the market and the value of specific companies. And he added that sharing the news with his family about his newfound financial success, that we were now millionaires, gave him tremendous joy. And of course, I'll deviate from his statement to suggest that, hey, unlike the folks on Capitol Hill who trade insider knowledge and stuff all the time ahead of various pieces of legislation put forth by their K Street friends, just a slightly different take on things. In remarks from Melvin Capital, Chief Gabriel Plotkin, the hedge funder, insists his firm learned a painful lesson from its GameStop short position, though he insisted it wasn't bailed out. That's a bunch of BS. They had to take on a couple billion to get bailed out. He starts by noting that his firm had nothing to do with Robinhood's decision to pause trading in GameStop, and that it is very important to understand that absolutely none of Melvin's short positions are part of any effort to artificially depress or manipulate downward the price of a stock. And so, a quip from their opening statement says, when our research suggests a company will not live up to expectations and its stock price is overvalued, we might short a stock. Like with our long positions, our practice is to short a stock for the long term after extensive research. We also short stocks because when the markets go down, we have a duty to protect our investors' capital. There are laws governing shorting stock, and of course we always follow them. Wink, wink, right? In addition, it is very important to understand that absolutely none of Melvin's short positions are part of any effort to artificially depress or manipulate downward the price of a stock. And nothing about our short position prevents a company from achieving its objectives. Of course not. Not when your investors demand a 10% return on investment, now would they? And of course there's his prepared remarks for today as well. And so continuing on, we get to Robinhood co-founder and CEO Vlad Tenev claims that the events of that day, when the price of GameStop shares soared above $300, were extraordinary, and that the firm did what it did to its clients, cutting off orders in certain meme stocks due to, as he has insisted many times before, clearing-related requirements. Robinhood has changed the investing world for the better, Tenev insists, adding that his firm didn't favor hedge funds. And a quip out of his statement says, what we experienced last month was extraordinary, and the trading limits we put in place on GameStop and other stocks were necessary to allow us to continue to meet the clearinghouse deposit requirements that we pay to support customer trading on our platform. We have since taken steps to raise $3.4 billion in additional capital to allow our customers to resume normal trading across Robinhood's platform, including trading in the stocks we were restricted on January 28th. We look forward to continuing to serve our customers. Well, I think they might have lost a little confidence in them and have probably jumped to other more favorable platforms at this point, but I digress. But, as we noted earlier, the biggest star target in tomorrow's hearing is Citadel founder, billionaire Ken Griffin, whose testimony had not been released. So, that takes us over to the next article, Citadel's Griffin likely to be the biggest target of today's congressional hearings, where we do have it now here on late Wednesday. This article says, despite the fact that it was reported on Wednesday that Reddit ringleader Deep Effing Value was being sued for securities fraud in the GameStop fiasco, Ken Griffin's Citadel is likely going to be the biggest target during Thursday's congressional hearings. At the core of the run-up in GameStop stock was Griffin's Citadel, executing trades on behalf of Robinhood, who it pays for order flow. Griffin was also at the center of the controversy due to one of his other businesses offering up a $2 billion bailout to Melvin Capital, who was hit hard by the run-up in shares. And so, Griffin will likely become the target for all types of grandstanding and faux outrage at Thursday's hearing, where a clueless House Financial Services Committee will do their best to fake any understanding of capital markets while attempting to put on a political show. Citadel could be the scapegoat for all types of new financial regulation, Bloomberg wrote on Wednesday. Eric Gordon, a professor at the University of Michigan's Ross School of Business, said, Ken sits in a unique position. The more roles you play in the industry and the bigger roles you play work to your advantage until something goes wrong and are looking for somebody to blame. Then those bigger roles make you a bigger target. And a big role Citadel does, in fact, play. Citadel Securities handled 27% of all daily trades last year, generating $6.7 billion of revenue, Bloomberg noted. They were one of the first firms to invest in the technology that today makes up the plumbing of the financial markets. As we have reported at length, Citadel handles Robinhood's order flow, allowing them to have microsecond-long first-mover advantages when executing trades for unwitting retail investors. Oh, and how long is a microsecond, you might ask? Oh, that's about 1,000th of a second. And what sort of technology do you have to have in order to have trades that stinking quick? Well, not only do you have to have algos that read the headlines and move and shake the financials and figure out where to go, but you also have to have either microwave or perhaps even laser technology, beamed at the trading houses in conjunction with that to handle microsecond long first mover advantages. Yeah. Griffin has defended Citadel to Congress before, appearing before the Senate Banking Committee back in 2014 after being featured in Michael Lewis's book Flash Boys, Exposed High-Frequency Trading. This time around, he is certain to have his work cut out for him. Representatives Jesus Chuy Garcia said, hedge funds and Wall Street elites get rich off instability in our financial system and don't care if making a quick buck means playing with people's livelihoods. Analyst Isaac Boltanski commented, as long as Ken Griffin sticks to his talking points and doesn't take the bait, Citadel will be fine. We happen to agree. Like any untouchable business, Citadel has done its fair share of cozying up to Washington elite, which will be sure to help them stay in favor with Washington, regardless of the outcome on Thursday, Bloomberg notes. Says the firm has also hired several former Securities and Exchange Commission officials, including Stephen Luparello, who ran the agency's Trading and Markets Division and is now Citadel Securities' legal chief. The hedge fund accounts former Federal Reserve Chairman Ben Bernanke as a senior advisor, and U.S. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen, also an ex-Fed chief, collected more than $800,000 in speaking fees from Citadel while she was out of government. And by the way, who is now the Treasury Secretary under Biden? None other than, she's a girl, Janet Yellen, former Fed head prior to Jerome Powell. See how this works, folks? It's a big club, and you ain't in it. Recall, we reported yesterday that the hearing is also said to be focusing on short selling and stock manipulation. Bloomberg reported Tuesday that the hearing would also focus on consumer protection, short squeezes, and the roles of gamification of trading in social media, which should be a hoot considering precisely nobody in Congress comprehends equity valuations, how capital markets work, what a short squeeze is, or really anything other than how to trade on inside government information. And that, of course, is what makes it purely laughable, and why it is truly hysterical when we saw the accord between people like Mad Max and Mnuchin here from a couple years back. And of course, here we see the trading surge. Citadel Securities revenue and earnings more than doubled in 2020. Yeah, thanks to the likes of handling the order books from places like Robinhood. Sure. The topics were reportedly sent out on Monday in a memo sent to members of the House Financial Services Committee by Democratic staff. The memo says that GameStop chaos raises questions regarding whether legislators and regulators should take a closer look at existing rules governing short sales and related disclosures, as well as the conflicts between the practice of payment for order flow and firms' best execution obligations. Lest we forget, it was short sellers who were the target in a GameStop run-up, not the parties who may have conspired to manipulate the price of the security artificially by buying it all at once. Though we can't say we are surprised that Congress already appears to be off base before the hearing was even started. The memo also states it also raises important questions about the efficacy of anti-market manipulation laws and whether technology and social media have outpaced regulation in a manner that leaves investors and the markets exposed to unnecessary risks. And of course, you can read our entire explanation of just how cozy Robinhood and Citadel are, and, more importantly, how they make their money here. That's a separate article dating back, a few days or so ago. But nonetheless, let's see. It looks like who's up at the moment here? Looks like we've got Rep. Lee Zeldin out of New York asking questions. All right, well, we'll tune back into that here momentarily. Let me get to one final article and talk about exposing the Robinhood scam. Here's how much Citadel paid to Robinhood to buy your orders. And of course, before I get into that, I will say this. As the opening statements and that were going on, a couple questions were asked just around the noon hour here before the top of the broadcast, talking about order flows and whether or not it is legal to short sell. And of course, the correct answer to that should have been no for the high-frequency trading. But of course, in testimony now by Mr. Robinhooder himself, clearly stated on the record that it is indeed not a problem. So, nonetheless, let's break this article down. Frankly, we've had it with the constant stream of lies from Robinhood and never-ending bullshit from the company's CEO, Vlad Tenev. With Tenev scheduled to testify on Thursday alongside the CEOs of Citadel, Melvin Capital, and Reddit, the a priori mea culpas have started to emerge, if a little too late. The former HFT trader spoke late on Friday on the All In podcast hosted by Chamath Palihapitiya, who had strongly criticized Robinhood over the trading restrictions, and Jason Calacanis, a Robinhood investor, and said that no doubt we could have communicated this a little better to customers. I wonder if they'll get into Dave Portnoy and his Barstool Sports and that, and his claim that these guys should be in jail. But I digress. What he is referring to, of course, is Robinhood's outraged decision to restrict the buying of 13 heavily shorted stocks on January 28th that had been driven to record highs, including GameStop, whose shares had surged more than 1,600%. Tenev said the restrictions were necessary due to a large increase in collateral/deposit requirements by the DTCC, but that was not spelled out in automated emails sent to Robinhood customers early on January 28th. And then he decided to pull the oldest trick and deflect attention from his own mistakes by blaming conspiracy theories. Of course. As soon as those emails went out, the conspiracy theories started coming, so my phone was blowing up with, "How could you do this? How could you be on the side of the hedge funds?" he said. What Tenev did not say or explain is why his company, which is merely a client-facing front of Citadel, which buys the bulk of Robinhood's order flow to use it perfectly legally in any way it sees fit, was so massively undercapitalized that the DTCC required several billion more in collateral to protect Robinhood's own investors against the company's predatory ways of seeking to capitalize on the gamification of investing, making it nothing more or less than a trivial pursuit to millions of Gen Z and millennial investors, a point which Michael Burry made so vividly. The hashtag Main Street Revolution is a myth. Zero commissions and gamified apps were designed to feed flows to the two most influential Wall Street trading houses. A few high frequencies hedge funders got hurt, but if retail is moving toward more trading and away from fundamentals, Wall Street owns that game. Hashtag stonks by design. Incidentally, we know why Tenev did not mention it. It's because Robinhood's back office is a shambles of a shoestring operation, one which never anticipated either such a surge in trading, not a multi-billion-dollar collateral requirement, but had Robinhood been a true brokerage instead of pretending to be one, and run merely to open as many retail accounts as it could in the shortest amount of time, thus generating the most profit in the quickest amount of time to allow its sponsors a quick and profitable exit, it would actually have been on top of this. It's also why Tenev's ridiculous pleas for immediate settlement instead of the usual T+2 arrangement, which has not been an issue for any other brokers, is nothing but a straw man argument which he hopes to present in Congress. Which brings us to a totally separate topic, and one which Tenev will one way or another have to address. The fact that Robinhood is a de facto subsidiary of Citadel, whose entire business model is to sell retail orders to a handful of HFT market makers first and foremost. Citadel. In doing so, the only ones who benefited from the surge in retail trading are Robinhood itself, by pocketing millions more from selling order flow to Citadel, Virtu, Two Sigma, Wolverine, and other high-frequency trading market-making venues, as well as Citadel, which made billions by having an advanced look at the biggest surge in retail stock, and option orders flow in history, and being able to trade ahead of and around it. Here we see the total call volumes net. This goes all the way back to about 2000. It used to be somewhere in about the 3,000-4,000 range to, in 2020, because of the gamification of apps like Robinhood, all of a sudden now we're pushing about 37,000 and change. And no, it's not a conspiracy theory, Vladimir. It is the stone cold truth, as Jeffrey Gunlock suggested last week when he said Robinhood, should be forced to change its name to Hood Robin. I grow so weary of lies through nomenclature which are ubiquitous these days, adding, to be clear, the name change would reflect Robinhood robbing the little guy, nothing else. And there we see said tweet from Mr. Gunlock. As an aside, how dare we allege that Citadel was buying order flow to front-run it? After all, that very allegation, Zero Hedge had this to say way back when. This is how a few thousand retail day traders on Robinhood move the market. Robinhood sells their order flow to high-frequency trader algos who front-run the trades and massively accentuate the momentum. And there you see CDN, Robinhood, their assets. There it is, Citadel Securities, about 65.5% of total orders, etc., etc. And that was sent clear back on June 13th, 2020, coupled with a reminder that Robinhood engages exclusively in a practice called Payment for Order Flow, PFOF, which says Robinhood's financial arrangement with Citadel. There it is. Again, June 13th, 2020. Which is what allowed Robinhood to provide free trading in the first place that nearly destroyed us when last June Citadel's lawyer army threatened to sue us into the ground for suggesting precisely that. And there we see Citadel Securities does not engage in such conduct. Really? And that was a letter back to Zero Hedge at the time after being accused. Some key phrases of note from the above text. Front-running is an industry term of art that refers to an illegal form of trading. Citadel Securities does not engage in such conduct, in effect front-running, and there was no factual basis whatsoever for Zero Hedge to publish such an incendiary, false, and reckless allegation to its 742,000 Twitter followers. It's up to 771,000 now. Zero Hedge statements obviously disparages the lawfulness and integrity of Citadel Securities' business practices. Quite obviously, this most recent iteration of the same harmful allegation was not made in jest, and we demand that Zero Hedge immediately retract this tweet by deleting it from Zero Hedge's Twitter page. A refusal to promptly take down these remedial steps will be seen as further evidence of actual malice and will only increase the already substantial legal risk faced by you and Zero Hedge. Well, we now officially know all about Citadel's modus operandi because just a few days after we received that letter, none other than financial regulator FINRA revealed the Citadel Securities was censured and fined for engaging in, drum roll, trading ahead of customer orders, as letter of acceptance number 2014-0418-59401 revealed. And there you see it. Citadel Securities traded ahead of certain inactive over-the-counter customer orders. Whoops. FINRA Rule 5320A, Facts and Violative Conduct. And there we see all the verbiage in that stating as such. So apparently, that little charade that they tried to play on Zero Hedge must have been just a PR bit, huh? Now, we admit that our financial jargon is a bit rusty these days, but trading ahead of customer orders sounds awfully similar to another far more popular term of art, one which we know very well, front running. Shocker. Jargon aside, some of the other highlighted words we are familiar with, such as hundreds of thousands and 559 instances in which Citadel traded ahead of customer orders. And while we may be getting a little ahead of ourselves here, it was Citadel's own lawyers that informed us on more than one occasion that front running is an unethical and illegal trading practice. So, what are we to make of this? Could it be that Citadel was engaging in at least 559 instances of what its lawyers called unethical and illegal trading practice? Surely not. After all, the lawyers would surely know very well how ridiculous and laughable their letter and threats would look if ever emerged that Citadel was indeed front-running its customers. But wait, it gets even funnier. Back in April 2004, long before Citadel became the dominant market maker and buyer of retail order flow, controlling a whopping 27% of total U.S. equity volume market share in 2020, according to Bloomberg, at a staggering 46% of retail order flow, it was Citadel's own general counsel, Adam Cooper, who urged the SEC to ban payment for order flow because it distorts order routing decisions, is anti-competitive, and creates an obvious and substantial conflict of interest between broker-dealers and their customers. As Cooper also revealed, broker-dealers accepting payment for order flows have a strong incentive to route orders based on the amount of order flow payments, which benefit these broker-dealers. Carrying forward here, and the punchline, payment for order flow is a practice that on its face is at odds with a broker-dealer's obligations to its customers. Flash forward, we do not believe that a broker-dealer that accepts payment for order flow and does not pass such payments on to its customers, either directly or through reduced execution fees or commissions, can consistently fulfill its best execution obligations. Which leads us to the one time Citadel was actually telling the truth. Because payment for order flow creates fundamental conflicts of interest that cannot be cured by disclosure. The Commission would ban payment for order flow altogether. It is crucial that this ban include not only exchange-sponsored programs, but also payment for order flow arrangements entered into privately or between order flow providers and market centers. Little did Citadel know that just 15 years later it would be the single biggest beneficiary of paying for order flow, a practice which has allowed Citadel founder to amass a trophy collection of some of the most expensive real estate in the world. And there you see some of Ken Griffin's residences. Just $122 million here for this guy, $58.75 million for that guy there, $238 million for this little chateau, $99 million there, $85 million here, $60 million there, just some chump change. We also know all this is true because we were also among the first to expose Robinhood as a client-facing front for Citadel back in 2018, when we wrote, Robinhood is said to get 40% revenue from high-frequency trade firms like Citadel, in which we said that stealing from millennials is to give to the rich. Robinhood app sells user customer data to make a quick buck from the high-frequency trading firms on Wall Street. Carrying on, says the conclusion was a searing prediction of what would happen a little over 2 years later. A few anonymous venture capitalists told Bloomberg that Robinhood has already begun to see the consequences of their cozy relationship with Wall Street firms, which has degraded the company's image. With 6 million clients, most of whom are millennials, seeking an anti-Wall Street investing culture, could soon find out that they, too, have been conned by Robinhood founders into thinking the app offers free investing. Folks, are you starting to get the picture here? There is no such thing as a free lunch. And if you're on social media and you're not paying for it, who or what is the product? You! Of course you are. And your data. Doesn't matter if it's Facebook, doesn't matter if it's Twitter, and of course now as we find out, Robinhood is no different. That said, we were not the first to expose Robinhood's ways. That honor falls to our friend Joe Saluzzi and Sal Arnott, who for over a decade have led the crusade against high-frequency trading and who in November 2014 wrote, "Beware of those offering free retail trades." And a quick quip out of that says the latest free thing, which is creating quite a buzz, the hot term for this is disrupting, is free retail trading by a company called Robinhood. What is Robinhood? According to an article in the Irish Times yesterday, founded by Stanford mathematics graduate Vlad Tenev and Baiju Bhatt last year, Robinhood is a stock brokerage that charges no commission. Robinhood is offering free stock trades and no-cost real-time market data. How do they do it? According to the company, they don't have brick-and-mortar companies and don't spend millions on Super Bowl ads. Technology has allowed them to eliminate much of the human intervention, and paper confirms. And how do they make money? According to their website, Robinhood has two key revenue streams, charging interest for margin trading and collecting interest on cash balances. So, a couple other interesting points out of that says members sending retail orders may elect to display those orders on the Edgebook attributed data feed with their generic retailer identified RTAL. Also flashing forward, Robinhood has many revenue streams. On day one, those included the margin lending, payment for order flow, interest on cash balances. We'll have those on day one, Tenev said on CNBC's halftime report. 2 points here. Vlad Tenev's entire background is high-frequency trading. He knew from day one that he could create a free brokerage if only he were to quietly sell all the order flows to a generous sponsor, say Citadel. It's also why we find laughable his recent tweet asking, obviously rhetorically, what exactly is high-frequency trading, and is it evil? Tenev then went on into a rambling, nonsensical defense of HFT and why it's not evil, concluding that high-frequency trading is just what you get when you apply technology to trading, and getting data moving faster between trading centers will enhance trading for us all. And there you see that. What he did not say is that high-frequency trading is just a perfectly legal and widely accepted way of front-running retail order flow, usually by the order of a few milliseconds, explaining the presence of lasers at the New York Stock Exchange in Mahwah, and then selling it to the highest bidder, something he knew almost a decade ago when he launched Robinhood. And so there we see the Robinhood revenue by product category, etc., etc. Citadel shares of Robinhood revenues, etc., etc., the trading surge, etc., etc. The bottom line, probably not, but we don't have a definitive answer until we find out just how much profit Citadel made from buying all this critical data, which gives us an early glimpse into not only which discrete individual trade, but also a sense of which way the retail horde is moving. We are confident that this week congressional hearings will quickly go to the bottom of this critical question of just how profitable this order flow, which it paid Robinhood $362 million to procure, is for Citadel, because anything less will confirm that this latest hearing is nothing but a kangaroo court meant to appease retail investors that someone in Washington is doing something. When in reality, everyone knows that what Citadel wants, Citadel gets, and there is no sign that Citadel will ever tire of making billions out of the same order flow for which it pays sub-pennies on the dollar to Robinhood. As for Robinhood's trite virtue signaling of taking from the rich and giving to the poor, all it took was 30 billion sub-penny rebates from Citadel for the firm to remember who really calls the shots. So a bit of a windy, long article, but a fairly good one in explaining how all this business between Robinhood and Citadel, the front-running, the lack of calling it front-running, the fact that now almost 2 years ago they threatened to sue Zero Hedge for calling it exactly what it was, and they nailed it right on the head. And lo and behold, wouldn't you know, here we are 2 years later seeing that very same thing pan out. Shocker, isn't it? All right, well, let me let some of this play through. Let's see where exactly they are at. Let's see here. We'll let a little bit of insanity play through, see what it's worth here.
My Democrat colleagues, four of whom on this very committee, co-sponsored a bill that would impose a financial transaction tax on the purchase of securities and certain derivatives. And just recently, after the market volatility surrounding GameStop in January, Democrats renewed the call, many Democrats anyway, renewed the call for a financial transaction tax. On just January 28th, Congresswoman Ilhan Omar tweeted, "How about this? Financial transaction tax now." Congressman Peter DeFazio is the lead sponsor of the bill. He's already put the bill back in for this session of Congress. It's now House Resolution 328 of 2000. So it's called the Wall Street Tax Act of 2021. I actually have a copy of it from the last session here. It's in again now. And he says, Congressman DeFazio says that a financial transaction tax would, quote, help create a more level playing field for Main Street. So with that background, Mr. Tenev, this question is directed at you. The Robinhood platform has more than 13 million users, and most of them are small dollar retail investors. If the federal government levied a 0.1% transaction tax on the sale of securities, and I know one of my colleagues, French Hill, my good friend, mentioned this earlier, but I want I want to expand upon it a little more. How would that 0.1% transaction tax on the sale of securities affect your platform and the retail investors that are your customers?
Thank you, Congressman. And we'd be happy to engage in this discussion much more in the future. Um, a 10 basis point financial transaction tax would eat into the returns of our customers, which, as you pointed out, are largely smaller investors. And in that sense, it would be a cost to the retail investor. Of course, that would have to be weighed against the potential benefits of this tax. And I know it's a more complicated issue than meets the eye at first glance.
Okay, well, thank you for that answer. My next question is actually for Jennifer Schlupp. I know you spent your career specializing in financial regulation. In your expert opinion, would a financial transaction tax directly prevent fraud or market manipulation?
No, I don't think a financial transaction tax would have an effect on fraud or manipulation. I also don't think that it ultimately financial transaction taxes often fail to raise money, and they distort trading in a way that's not necessarily foreseen initially by the tax. And I'd like to just add in there as well that financial transaction taxes, while they initially might seem like a small imposition on an individual investor, those taxes often hurt individual investors and their long-term retirement goals by affecting the institutions that also do the trading in mutual funds and with retirement money. I don't think a financial transaction tax is a good idea.
And a quick follow-up to that, Mr. Schlupp, what do you think a financial transaction tax would have done anything to prevent the market volatility and disruption we saw just this past January?
No, I don't think it's related here. There's been some discussion that it might have decreased the amount of trading, and thus changed the volatility. It's not my opinion that that would have had any effect on this particular circumstance.
Thank you. I only have a minute left, so let me just summarize. The financial transaction tax, supported by many Democrats, would do nothing to prevent market manipulation or fraud, would have not prevented the market disruption in January, and most importantly, would hurt retail investors. Yet Democrats are claiming that the events surrounding GameStop and Robinhood in January make it imperative to implement this financial transaction tax. It just doesn't add up. A financial transaction tax would make it more expensive for small retail investors to trade. And so much for looking out for Main Street. I believe we should be working together to find ways to open up markets to retail investors, not close them. Instead of making trade more expensive with a burdensome tax, let's look for ways to empower retail traders. Thank you, Madam Chair. I yield back.
Thank you very much. Ms. Beatty, you're recognized for 5 minutes. Ms. Beatty?
All right. Well, I think that's going to do it for this broadcast here today. We've been going at it here for a little while. I did drop the link to the House Financial Services hearing that's going on. Seems I tuned in right at the right time to hear the Dems say that proposing a tax somehow is going to magically fix this, as taxes typically do. It's just more greasing the skids for them. And of course, I'm sure nothing will be done about any sort of insider trading done behind the scenes with our various Congress members and senators. Oh no, that's not the focus here, of course. So nonetheless, again, dog and pony show, more BS at the circus, the big top known as Congress here today. So bottom line, trade accordingly, right? Use your own smarts. Don't worry about what these jokers are doing, and find somebody other than probably Robinhood to do it with, and Citadel. That's probably one of the better things to do. So that's going to do it for this broadcast here today. Appreciate you guys tuning in. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe across all the platforms, and we'll see you back here shortly on the next one. Take care. God bless everybody.